So what about the next 40 years? I think ZoeCare plans to express the value of all human life, because that's what ZoeCare does. And that is my vision for the next 40 years. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce this evening's keynote speaker. Scott Klusendorf is the founder and president of Life Training Institute, established in 2004 to challenge and equip pro-life advocates to persuasively defend the value of the unborn in the public square. Since 1991, Scott has appeared on numerous national syndicated Christian programs such as Dr. James Dobson's Focus on the Family, Lee Strobel's Faith Under Fire, and Billy Graham's Hour of Decision. In addition to the over 80 university debates Scott has been a part of, some of the people Scott has publicly debated include Nadine Strawson, the former president of the ACLU, Dr. Malcolm Potts, the first international medical director for Planned Parenthood, and Kathy Kneer, president of Planned Parenthood in California. Scott is the author of The Case for Life, Equipping Christians to Engage the Culture, and co-author of Stand for Life, a student's guide for making the case and saving lives. He's also published pro-life apologetics articles in the Christian Research Journal, Clear Thinking, and Focus on the Family Citizen. He graduated from UCLA with honors and received his master's degree in Christian apologetics from Biola University. On a personal note, I went to one of Scott's classes 3 years ago at a conference, and it radically altered how I thought about pro-life apologetics. We're very excited to have Scott here tonight, so please welcome Scott Klusendorf.
Chris, I'm not going to let you go away so fast. Come over here if you would for just a minute. I don't know if you know how hard and challenging a job it is to be an executive director, but this man has taken on a truckload of responsibility with areas of responsibility outside of his comfort zone, outside of his sweet spot, and he has done so with a gracious heart, a buoyancy, and I'd like us to stand and thank him for his commitment to ZoeCare. Thank you, Chris. In just a moment, I'm going to have you look around the room and stare at some people. And if you're a single guy and you've noticed some nice-looking single women here tonight, this will be your God-sanctified moment to make eye contact. Do not laugh. I met my wife that way. 1, 2, 3, go. Stare at some people. Go ahead. Just look around the room. Make some eye contact. All right. Look back this way. What makes us equal? Chris nailed the theme of what we're about in pro-life ministry, the value of the human being. But what makes us equal? We live in a culture obsessed with equality. They want marriage equality. They want to be able to marry their canary if they want to. They want social equality, income equality, every kind of equality imaginable. But what makes us equal in the first place? Are we all equal physically in this room this evening? I assure you we are not. Last year at exactly this time, I went back at age 57 to the high school where I played basketball as a high schooler. And I played on the alumni team against the current student basketball team. You are laughing. We beat them by 24 points. It's called old man strength and old man smarts. We plugged the middle, forced them to take bad shots, and slowed the pace down to molasses, and they were done. Yours truly took one shot in that game. It was a three-pointer, nothing but net, baby. I drained it. I also had a rebound and 2 assists. You young guys out there are thinking, that's nothing, man. I do that waking up in the morning. It's a big deal when you're 57, when your single objective for the evening is avoid hospitalization. If I had to go one-on-one with any of you young guys out here and gals, I'd lose. I nearly lost a game of horse last night to a teenager. Now, what I'm getting at here is if physical ability is what gives us our value, and that's what determines our rights, those of you with more physical ability have a greater right to life than those with less. If Planned Parenthood is right, that your development determines your value, then those with more of it have a greater right to life than those with less. And you can throw human equality on the ash heap of history. Are we all equally self-aware right now? How many of you have to start your day with coffee in the morning? You can raise your hand. Coffee is proof that God has not utterly forsaken us. I'm an agnostic before my second cup in the morning. Don't feel bad if that's you. If Peter Singer is right, that self-awareness is what gives you value, and the unborn can be killed because they're not self-aware, those of you with more self-awareness have a greater right to life than those with less. Human equality is gone. As you were looking around the room a few minutes ago, there's one thing we share equally in this room. Only one. We all have the same human nature that bears the image of our Maker. Now, what's your human nature? Well, it's the thing that makes you human and not some other living thing. For example, a dog has a dog nature. Cats, I have learned, have a satanic nature. You have a human nature. And your human nature determines the kind of thing that you are. And men and women, as we are gathered here tonight in Bozeman, Montana, whether you know it or not, our nation is having a gargantuan debate over human nature. And that debate impacts you, it impacts your children, and it will impact your grandchildren for decades to come. Because we are arguing as a nation over this question: who counts as one of us? And we are part of a culture right now that is answering that question entirely the wrong way. And what that's going to mean for all of us here tonight is that we all are going to have to step up and become apologists. Now, let me tell you what an apologist is. It's not someone who runs around and says he's sorry all the time. That's what parents of teenagers do. Rather, an apologist is someone who lays out reasons for what they believe. And in 1 Peter 3:15, we are challenged as believers to always be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. And what's going to happen tonight is I am going to show you how to be that person who can stand up and give an answer for the pro-life view that is within you. And you're going to know how to do it in under a minute or less. In fact, we're going to lock the doors. Nobody's leaving until you can recite what I teach you. That's a joke, and it went down about as fast as the Vikings are going to go down this year. But that aside, I know that joke didn't work at all. Hey, feel bad for me. I've been a Rams fan for a long time, and it's only recently we've become full persons. You football fans got that. Tonight, I want to talk to you about how to make a gracious and yet persuasive case for life on hostile turf. I think you know that we live in a culture that is bitterly divided right now over the question of human value. If you watched what happened in the U.S. Senate last week and the weeks preceding over Supreme Court justices, you know that we are a nation in deep, deep division over a lot of things. And I'm going to tell you why that Senate hearing was as hot as it appeared to be to you. It had nothing to do with politics in the abstract. It had nothing to do with party loyalty even, really. You know what was really going on? Part of our nation has decided it's perfectly acceptable to set aside an entire class of human beings to be killed. And another half of us say, no, that's not going to work. And Abraham Lincoln, a century and a half ago, said, when you have a debate as a nation over who counts as one of us, you're going to have a house divided. And that's what we've got right now. And now is our moment as Christians to step up and persuasively engage the culture around us, not with heat, not with anger, not with rage, but with solid, God-given reasons why we believe the way we believe. And tonight I want to give you the 3 questions that will help you be persuasive on the issue of life. And I have some good news for you. You don't have to have a PhD to do this. You don't even have to have a graduate degree. You don't have to have a high school degree. As my friend Greg Kokel says, in order to give a persuasive case for life, you just need to know how to put a pebble in someone's shoe. You ever had a pebble in your shoe when you're out hiking? It'll wear on you and wear on you until you stop to deal with it. These 3 questions we're about to look at will help you give people something to think about. It's not on you to close the deal. Do not raise your hands, but I'm going to ask you a question. How many people have you won to the Lord in your life? Second question, how many people will you win to the Lord in this life? And I'm going to answer both questions for all of you because it's the same answer for all of us. 0 and 0. You will never win anybody to the Lord. You know why? Because God's in the business of saving people. He does that work. You know what we do as faithful ambassadors for Jesus? We convey truth. We put those pebbles in people's shoe and give them something to think about. So here are the 3 questions that will help you do this. And you know why this matters to an issue like ZoeCare? Because it's easy to think that, well, hey, you know, Chris, the team, what they're doing here is they're just giving out things to clients who are suffering and who have trouble in their lives, and they're just kind of helping them along. Yes, they are doing all of that and doing it well. But you know what's really going on in the mind of that client? A worldview question over the value of her child. If she believes her child has intrinsic dignity, meaning the child is valuable simply because it's a human being, her child's going to live. If she doesn't believe that, her child's in grave danger. And day in and day out, the staff is engaging the client on the question of human dignity. And you get to engage as well. So here are your 3 questions. Number 1, what is the unborn? We have to know how to answer that. We have to. Secondly, what is it that gives us value as human beings? What makes us valuable? And number 3, what's our duty in all of this? What is the unborn? What makes us valuable? And what's our duty? That first question, what is the unborn, is the one most people don't want to talk about. In fact, C.S. Lewis, the great Christian apologist, said, the most dangerous ideas in our culture today are those that are simply assumed to be true, not those that are spelled out. If Lewis were alive today, he'd tell us that the atheist Richard Dawkins isn't your biggest problem if you're a Christian. Your biggest problem is people around you assuming things to be true that they've never thought through or argued for. And this is especially true on the question, what is the unborn? I wonder how many of you read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn when you were in high school. Can I see your hands if you read that book? Okay. You may remember, some of you this is going back a ways, that there was a remarkable exchange that takes place in chapter 32 where Huck Finn happens on the property of Aunt Sally. And Aunt Sally's a little bit mixed up. She sees Huck coming down the road, and she rushes out to meet him, and she thinks it's Tom Sawyer. She rushes out and says, my boy, where have you been? We've been waiting for you. Where have you been? And Huck doesn't know what to do, so he makes up a story. He says, well, ma'am, we were on a steamboat, and it blew a cylinder head. That's what happened. Aunt Sally says, my gosh, was anybody hurt? No, ma'am. It killed a Negro, but nobody got hurt. Well, that's good, said Aunt Sally, because sometimes people do get hurt. What was just assumed about the black man? That he wasn't one of us. It wasn't argued for. It was simply assumed. It's like the IRS asking you, when did you start cheating on your taxes? Not if, when. Assuming the very thing they hope to prove. And this happens on abortion all the time. People simply assume the unborn are not one of us. 5 years ago, the President of the United States celebrating and commemorating Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court case that legalized abortion in this country, said that this was a day that all Americans should appreciate. Why is that, Mr. President? Listen to his words. Quote, "Because this is a nation where everyone gets to pursue their own dreams," end quote. Mr. President, with all due respect to your office, does, quote, "everyone" include the unborn? Does Roe v. Wade help them pursue their dreams? You see, he simply assumed the unborn were not one of us. He didn't argue for it. And this is the problem we face in the culture today. Now, for those of you that are under the age of 20, I want you to take a journey with me into the future. I want you to imagine we're 10 years into the future, and you have met the man or woman of your dreams, you are married, and you have a 5-year-old boy. And as you're at the kitchen sink one day washing dishes, that 5-year-old boy comes in behind you with your back turned, and while you're scrubbing away there, he says to you, "Daddy or Mommy, can I kill this?" Some of you ladies are going, "No, those cute little boys don't ask those questions." Allow me to enlighten you. This ring says I've been married 33 years to the most glorious woman in all of Christendom. We have a son 28, a son 27, a son 22, a daughter 18. I have personally heard the question, "Daddy, can I kill this?" more times than I can count, and almost always his hands are on his brother's throat when he's asking the question. What's the first question you would ask if you heard that little voice say those words? I know what it would be. What has he got? Cockroach, snail, okay, but don't show mom. Neighbor kitty, hold it. Brother by the throat, call the pastor, right? You have issues to deal with. You would never in 1,000 years say, "Sure, son, have at it," till you answered that predicate question, what has he got? Now, guess what we just did? We just solved the abortion issue. Can we kill the unborn? The answer is yes. If what? If the unborn are not human. If morally speaking, abortion is no different than clipping a fingernail, I have no interest in how many someone has. But we've got to answer the question, what is the unborn, before we answer the question, can we kill the unborn? And that's the question our culture assumes an answer to, but doesn't argue for. Nobody that we know would argue for choice in who decides if we were talking about killing toddlers. They only argue that way about killing the unborn because they assume the unborn are not one of us like the toddler is. That's the issue here. And if we as Christians don't make that the issue, our culture will consider that there's no issue here to worry about and keep on assuming a falsehood. We've got to make the main thing the main thing. The question, what is the unborn, is front and center. Nobody you know would argue we should trust people to make their personal decisions. They wouldn't argue for privacy. They wouldn't argue for choice. They wouldn't argue for economic hardship as reasons for killing toddlers. But they will give those reasons for killing fetuses. Why? Because they don't believe the unborn are one of us. That's the issue. That's the nation. Our nation was divided on the question of who counts as one of us 1.5 centuries ago, and we're divided again tonight. Well, I've raised the question. I'm going to answer it. What is the unborn? You'll be surprised I'm not going to go to Scripture to answer it. It's an empirical question. What is the unborn? Here's what the science of embryology says, and I'll summarize it for you in a sentence. From the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. I want you to hold your hand up like this, and I want you to pinch yourself real good on the back of your hands. Ladies, if your husband is not participating right now, you may grab skin cells off the back of his neck if you wish. Go ahead, get some skin cells. All right, give yourself a good pinch. Congratulations. You just sent a couple of hundred somatic cells hurling to their deaths on the lap in front of you. Every one of those cells, here's the bad news, contains your entire DNA encoding. Did you just commit mass homicide? No. And you know why. These cells on the back of your hand are merely part of a larger human entity, you. They are not whole living beings the way you were at the embryonic stage, the way I was at the embryonic stage. There's a difference in kind between each of our bodily cells and the embryonic human beings we once were. That's the science of embryology. Why is this difficult for people to get? Well, one reason is that their intuitions look at that early embryo, as I think our intuitions do. We look at that early embryo, maybe we've seen a microscopic image of one that's been blown up, where you can't even see the embryo without a microscope, and it's been blown up and you see what just looks like a tiny ball of cells. Our intuitions don't immediately go, oh wow, that's as cute as my niece Abigail. Our intuitions don't immediately go there, but sometimes our intuitions are wrong. And I'm going to give you an example from Richard Stith that may help. I want you to imagine it is 1970 and you are on a Mexican safari. Now, for those of you in the room under 40, I need to let you know about something. There was a time when we did not take pictures with our phones. We had these things called cameras. Cameras had shutters. The lens would open up, light would come in, record the image on this stuff called film. And only after you shot 36 exposures, not a moment before, you would carefully take the film out of the camera, you would put it in a little canister, then you would drive to the far corner of the mall parking lot where there was a little yellow shack called Photomat. You would drop your pictures off, wait a month and a half for them to come back, half of them overexposed. Do I preach gospel truth to those of us over 50? Yes, you know that. Well, you know also that in the late 60s, I think it was late 60s, maybe even earlier than that, the Polaroid camera came out. Now, some of you youngsters are going, hey, I have a Polaroid camera. It's really slick and cool looking. Not the original ones, but they had an advantage. You'd shoot your picture. You didn't have to wait a month and a half. You'd spit out the paper. You'd pull it out. Some of you are doing the muscle memory. I see it going on right now. You'd shake it for a couple of minutes, and your picture in about 90 seconds to 2 minutes would emerge right in front of you. It's 1970. You're on a Mexican safari. You have a Polaroid camera. You just happened to shoot a picture of a black jaguar leaping across the trail in front of us. Nobody films black jaguars, but you just did. They're rarely pictured. And you know National Geographic is going to pay you huge bucks for that pic. And while you're waiting breathlessly for that image to emerge, I come up behind you. I rip the Polaroid camera out of your hands. I yank the paper out of it, and I tear up your picture. Are you angry at me? Yeah, you're going to kill me even if you are pro-life, right? What if I replied, what's the big deal? There's no jaguar there. That was just a white paper with a brown smudge. You would look at me incredulous, and you would say, are you kidding? The jaguar in the picture was already there. We just couldn't see him yet because he was still developing. Men and women, from the one cell stage, you were already there. We just couldn't see you because you were still developing. That's the science of embryology. And yes, even those who support abortion in their candid moments will admit that what abortion does is intentionally end the life of a human being. Warren Hearn, America's largest abortionist, runs the Boulder Abortion Clinic in Boulder, Colorado. He wrote the book Abortion Practice that teaches how to do abortions. And before a Planned Parenthood conference, he told those assembled, we can no longer deny what we're doing. And listen to these chilling words. The sensations of dismemberment flow through the forceps like an electric current. That's abortion. And it doesn't wipe out cells, as feminist Camille Paglia readily admits. It destroys concrete individuals. That is the battle we're in. What is the unborn? A distinct, living, whole human being that abortion intentionally ends the life of. Second question we need clarity on. What makes us valuable? We've already determined that if human value is based on a degreed thing like physical ability or self-awareness, and we don't share that equally, those of you with more of those traits have more rights than those of us with less. There's 4 differences between you, the embryo, and you, the adult that's here tonight. And not one of those 4 differences is a good reason for saying we could kill you then, but not now. Between you, the embryo, and you, the adult, there's a difference of size, level of development, environment, meaning where you're located, and degree of dependency. Think of the acronym SLED, not hard to do here in Bozeman, where it's already snowing in October. It was warmer in Anchorage 10 days ago than it was here. I was wearing a t-shirt in Anchorage on the glacier, and I'm freezing my tail off here in Bozeman. So SLED will work for you. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. Those 4 differences don't matter. Let me show you why. Size, you were smaller as an embryo. But since when, as a matter of principle, does body size determine value? Men are generally larger than women. Do men deserve more rights than women simply because they're larger? Level of development, you were less developed. So, why does that matter? By the way, little parenthetical here. It is time for pro-life Christians to stop assuming the burden of proof every time an objection is raised by a critic. If they make the claim, they bear the burden of proof. If they claim that development gives us value, it's on them to defend that, not me. If they claim that self-awareness gives us value, they need to present an argument for that. It's not on me to refute them. They're the ones making the claim. Level of development. Yes, we were less developed as embryos. So, 2-year-old girls are less developed than 21-year-old young women. 2-year-old girls do not have a developed reproductive system yet. Are they less human and valuable than the 21-year-old who does? This was precisely the point that Abraham Lincoln made on the issue of slavery. Lincoln's critics would say that black man is different from us. He isn't like us. And Lincoln's reply was brilliant. So, is he different from us in ways that justify enslaving him? And to quote Lincoln exactly, here's how Lincoln replied. Quote, "You say man A is white, man B is dark. Oh, it is skin color then? The fair-skinned man having the right to enslave the dark-skinned man? Take care. By that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with skin fairer than your own. You say it is not skin color, it's a matter of intellect. The white man you allege has superior intellect to the dark man. Take care yet again, by that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with an intellect superior to yours. You say it isn't skin color, it's not intellect, it's interest. The white man you allege has it in his interest to enslave the dark man. Take care yet again, by that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet who can make it his interest to enslave you." Do you see what Lincoln just did there? The same arguments that are used to justify enslaving the black man work real well for enslaving whites. And at least Peter Singer, the ethicist at Princeton University, whose conclusions horrify us, at least he's consistent. Because you may know Singer. He's the guy who says no newborn should be considered a person until 30 days after birth, and disabled infants can be killed on the spot by the attending physician. He looks at Planned Parenthood, and here's what he tells them. You people are intellectually dishonest. Because you want to draw this arbitrary line between fetus and newborn, and it doesn't work. Here's why, says Singer. Fetus is not self-aware, newborn isn't self-aware. You can kill both. As soon as you make human value dependent on some degreed property that some have in more quantity than others, equality's gone. That's Lincoln's point. Size, level of development. What about environment, where you were located? You were in the womb, now you're out. So, how many of you drove at least 7 miles to get to this dinner tonight? If a journey of 7 miles did not change you from one kind of thing to another, how does a journey of 7 inches down the birth canal suddenly transform you from non-human, non-valuable thing we can kill to valuable human being we can't? The answer is, if you weren't already human and valuable, changing location isn't going to get you there. Finally, degree of dependency. You depended on your mother for survival. So, Since when does that mean we can kill you? There are cases in pediatrics where children are born who cannot tolerate formula. They can only tolerate their own mother's milk. What would we think of a mother who unplugged that child in that needy condition and said, my body, my choice, too bad, he depends totally on me, tough luck? Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. Think SLED. Those are the only 4 differences between you, the adult, and you, the embryo, and none of them are good reasons for saying you could be killed then, but not now. Now, I noticed a few of you taking notes faster than broke people at a Dave Ramsey seminar when I was going through that whole SLED acronym just a moment ago. And I want you to know that I have a SLED card here tonight that summarizes everything I just told you about the science of embryology and that SLED acronym. I have a SLED card here. We're going to auction it off to the first person who writes a check to $100,000 to ZoeCare, and you can take that home tonight. Actually, I will have some in the back when you leave, 1 per family till they run out. That's the only way I can do it. I end with this question. What's our duty? I'll give it to you in a sentence. It's to love our unborn neighbor and his mother. How do we love our unborn neighbor? We step up and defend him, and now I'm going to tell you how you can do that in a minute or less. How many of you at Thanksgiving or Christmas have family members who visit your table who aren't pro-life, who aren't Christian, who don't share your worldview? Can I see your hands? A lot of us. Let's suppose you have an aunt from Boston, we'll call her Aunt Betty, and she visits you, and she's eating her turkey, and she looks at you and says, now why are you pro-life? Here's what you're going to say. You're going to say this, and it will be done in under a minute, and you will put a pebble in her shoe when you do. Here's what you're going to say. Do you have a watch? Can you time me on this? All right, so anybody here got a watch in the front row that can do? Okay, you're on. When I say go, go. See if I get this done. Go. Aunt Betty, I'm pro-life because it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. And the science of embryology says that from the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct, living, and whole human being. And you know what else, Aunt Betty? There's no essential difference between the embryo you were and the adult you are today that would justify killing you back then. Differences of size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency are not good reasons for saying you have value now but had none back then. How'd I do? 40 seconds. All right, men and women, listen to me. Did I communicate biblical truth in that soundbite? Did I cite Bible verses, though? No. But I communicated truth. This is what it means to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. You are prepared to give a defense for what you believe. It doesn't have to be complex. And by the way, don't expect Aunt Betty to fall on her knees and say, thank you for straightening out my twisted thinking. It doesn't work like that. The great arguer philosopher William Rusher said, arguments are never won on the spot. I mean, think about your own marriage. When you're in a spat with your spout, I got to go to speech therapy after this. In a beef with your spouse, let's put it that way, and they're right and you're wrong, and you know it and they know it, do you slap yourself on the knee and go, honey, I'm so glad that the Lord put you in my life to straighten out my twisted thinking? Is that how it works? No. There's passive-aggressive tension in the air for a few days. Then it dissipates and we get back to normal, right? I'm now going to destroy the mic while I'm at it. In other words, your job is to give people something to think about. It's not on you to close the deal. How do we love the unborn's mother? 40% of all abortions are performed on women with prior abortion history. I just checked the stat. You know why they're having repeat abortions? Because the first one never got fixed. There's only one hope for sinful human beings, indeed for all of us in this room tonight. And that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because that gospel says that all of us here have a problem. God created us to worship and enjoy him, and we rebel against our Creator. And God, who would have been perfectly just to destroy us for our rebellion, sends Jesus to bear in full the judgment we deserve, so that those who trust in him alone for salvation are completely forgiven. And the fact that Jesus' sacrifice on our behalf was sufficient was proven because he was raised from the dead 3 days later. In other words, your sin and mine has been put on someone else who stood in our place condemned, so that adulterers, thieves, post-abortion men and women, liars, cheats can be welcomed into the family of God as dearly loved children. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And one of the beautiful things about ZoeCare is they are communicating that truth to a lot of brokenhearted people living with a lot of regrets. And it's our job to do that as well, to step up. 5 years ago in London, I had a day free, and I was over there speaking on pro-life issues, and I had my youngest son, Michael, with me, who at the time was 15. And I said, Michael, let's go to a place you got to see. We are going to the Imperial War Museum. It's on the south bank of the Thames River. If you're a history buff, put it on your bucket list. They have a Spitfire hanging from the ceiling, the plane that saved the West in 1940. We are not speaking German tonight because of the Spitfire and a guy named Winston Churchill. And I could not wait to take Michael into that museum and show him the tanks and the planes. They've got Hurricanes, Spitfires. They've got all kinds of World War I and World War II stuff to look at. And while we were waiting to go in, they put out these pictures that many of you have seen that are heartbreaking. They are of the evacuees. If you've read the Narnia series, why are the children in the country? Well, because Hitler wanted to intentionally shorten the war by killing England's children. He intentionally bombed central London to kill children. Churchill got wind of it and said, get the kids out of here. So you've seen the black and white photos in your history books. Children standing on the platforms of Charing Cross, Victoria, Waterloo, and other stations in London. And many of them are standing there holding their little numbers, holding a rope. They'll get on trains, they'll go out to the country, and many of them will never see their parents again. And I'm explaining this to Michael. And as I am, I feel a little tap on the shoulder. And I look behind me, here's an elderly woman, I'm going to guess late 70s, early 80s. She points up at one of those pictures of the evacuees and says, I was one of those kids. I grabbed Michael by the lapels. I yanked him over and said, we're going to listen to what she's about to tell us. She said, in August of 1940, my parents put me on the train at Waterloo. I never saw him again. I said, as if I didn't know, go on, what happened? She said 11 nights after I was put on that train, London got savaged by an aerial attack, and both my parents were killed. And if I had not been evacuated, I would have been killed. I said, what happened to you? She got a big smile on her face. And she said, oh, I had a good life. And listen to what she said. It was profound to me. She said, the family that took me in just rose up and adopted me. At this point, I'm bawling because I'm a history buff. And Michael's bawling because I got him by the neck. But if I may translate her words, they just stepped up. Now, for those of you that have seen the movie Dunkirk, and you've seen movies like Their Darkest Hour, you have a sense of what England was facing in 1940. They stood alone. We weren't there. In fact, at that point, we weren't even interested in being involved. We weren't providing any help. Hitler had all of Europe. The Brits barely got their expeditionary force through a miracle of God off Dunkirk. They stood alone. That British family could have looked at that 4-year-old girl and said, we don't even know if our nation's going to survive. We don't even know if we're going to have enough petrol. We don't know if we're going to have enough food. No. They looked at their neighbor and they loved their neighbor, and they stepped up and did their duty. Men and women, tonight, I'm asking you to step up and love your unborn neighbor and his mother through the work of ZoeCare. And I'm going to tell you, it won't be easy. We live in a culture that revels in killing children. Has that sunk in on us? It needs to. We need to feel the weight of that. And here in Bozeman is a ministry saying, we feel that weight. And we're not going to just love with sentiment. We're going to love with behavior. And they should not have to stand alone in that. And so, table host, I'm going to invite you right now to begin distributing to those at your table the response cards, and they are there on your table. So table hosts, if you'll start those going around. If nobody reaches for that envelope, you can be the leader and go ahead and reach for it. Also, I want you to grab something to write with. Make sure you grab a pen. They're in the envelopes there if you need one, if you need to have one. Also, make sure you secure the paper clip that is there with the response card. Everybody get a paper clip, a pen, and in just a moment, I'll walk you through what we're about to do to close our evening. Don't start filling your card out just yet. Wait just a moment, and I'll tell you how we're going to move forward on this. As soon as you have gotten something to write with and you have your response card, would you hold it up and wave it at me so that I know that we've all got them and we can all proceed together then? Go ahead, just hold them up high, wave them. Good. All right, very good. Here's what we're going to do. In just a moment, you'll fill this out. But I'm going to ask you to do two things tonight. First, I'm going to ask you to give a gift tonight that is truly sacrificial. One that stings the pocketbook a lot. The kind of gift you look at your spouse tomorrow morning as you're waking up and you say, honey, we gave what last night? Some of you can write a check for $25,000, and I'm telling you why I want you to do it. Because the big check you write tonight, the one that stretches you a lot, funds the vision that you heard Chris talk about. I was taking notes while he was up here, and this was remarkable, really, because this was not a dinner where you were asked to come and give money to keep the doors open so we don't go under. No, there's a vision. There were 162 clients that got services here last year. This is a medical facility. Do you know how important that is in reaching abortion-minded clients? It's gargantuan. They stay away from the centers that don't have that ability. This one does. There's a father initiative. You know why a lot of women abort? Because the men in their lives abandon them. We're working on that here. That's important stuff. There's a 45 North program that's reaching kids in school. Kindle's going into schools and talking about, hey, sexual integrity matters. There's a safe harbor program for churches. Can you imagine what would happen if every evangelical church in this community said, we're going to make protection of unborn children one of our ministry points? That would make a huge difference in this community. That needs to happen. But none of this can happen, men and women, on the cheap. It takes us stepping up and loving our unborn neighbor and his mother through the ministry of ZoeCare. So tonight I'm going to ask you to write a big check. I'm also going to ask you to do one other thing. After you write that big check, I'm going to ask you on this same response card to indicate an amount you will give monthly. Now, wait a minute. You're going, dude, you just asked me to drain my bank account. Now you want a monthly donation? Yeah. Here's why. The big check funds the vision. The monthly donations keep the pregnancy tests going, pay the staff, keep the lights on, as Tammy said. These are things that cost a lot. It's costly to reach out to your unborn neighbor. So tonight, if you need to huddle with your spouse for just a moment to figure out what the amount is you're going to give here, you do that. We're going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to stand up here and make my gift, and then we'll bring you back together. If you want to give, like I'm going to do tonight, using American Express, MasterCard, Visa, Discover, we can take all those. If you want to give by cash, make sure you make your check payable to ZoeCare. But take your response card. When you're done with your check, paper clip it to this card and hand it back to your table host, who will get the envelope going back around, and you can just put it right back in there. So will you join me? Let's take a few moments and let's step up and love our unborn neighbor through the ministry of ZoeCare.